Welcome to this chart section. What I'm hoping is that this first lesson is going to feed mainly as a recap on how to create charts and quickly. We have here the sales data working file. It has three sets of data. The sales data itself in the first sheet, then two effectively summarized bits of country sales, which gives us the total sales by country, and then year sales. Let's take the country sales first. If we want to create a chart, we simply either highlight the data we wish to graph, or if you want all of the data, just click into the data. If you make sure, if we just scroll up, that your data has headings at the top, then those headings will be used in your chart. Here I am in the country sales sheet. I click into the data. I would like a chart. I use the keyboard shortcut F11. Hey presto, I get a chart. That chart is the default chart type of columns, and each of the columns is a relative size to the data. Now, most of the columns are tiny because the data is skewed by this graph here, this massive amount for United Kingdom. Now, your chart will always be linked to the data, so we can go back to the data, and let's seriously reduce the value for United Kingdom down to 350, and then have a look at chart 1, and we can see the bar has dropped to 350, and the others are now come into appearance, because relatively they're not so far apart. They're still quite a way apart, but they're not so far apart. What we could also do to sort of offset this larger value is change the scale. Currently it goes to 400. If I double click here on the scale, I can see the maximum there is 400. If I make that 200, that doesn't change the value of United Kingdom, but what it does do is stops at 200. The rest of the value is still there, it's just not on the chart. But relatively, the other columns can now effectively be extended and they become more visible. That's one way of dealing with these massive offset values, is either reduce the offset value, that would be one way, or change the scale so the offset value is effectively off the scale. And then a third way is you could actually hide that value from the chart. If I go back to my data and select that row and hide it, and then come back to the chart, what you will notice is that column magically disappears. So hidden rows and columns do not appear in the chart, even if the chart area is covering that data. It's just a little point to recall there. That's the country sales. Nice quick chart. We've even hidden one of the columns and looked at how we can deal with this single massive value. With the year sales, again, we can click in, use our keyboard shortcut, F11, creates me a chart. However, it's created me double columns. What it's done is it's tried to chart the year because it's numeric. Excel says, numeric, you want that charting. Actually, I don't. Now we have two options here. One is to go back to year sales, change these to text values by putting the little single apostrophe at the front, which we could do, but we'd have to change all of them, and then recreate the chart. Or, back here in chart 2, we tell Excel that the year is not a data series, but actually a set of labels. We go to the chart tools design, select data. Here we can see the two series, year and sales. Well, year is not data, thank you, so I remove it. And then for the sales option, I go to edit on the category side here, and I tell it where to get the labels from by browsing the label range, which is actually my years. Close the browse, OK on the box. Notice here we now have the years. Notice in the chart we now have the years as labels rather than as data. That's one little thing to watch for if you're trying to chart, or effectively these numbers, but you want the numbers to be labels as we do with years. You either have to change them into text before you create the chart, or subsequently tell the chart that they're not data, they're actually just labels. That's two little options that you could encounter when creating charts. Now the sales data sheet has a lot of columns within it. Let's close the dialog box that opened when we looked at the data axes. Now in here, I don't want to chart all of this, I just want to chart the date and the sales. So that's the only information I need to highlight, date and sales. So both of those columns are highlighted. Then I can go with my keyboard shortcut and a chart is created. Now with sales data over time, probably a better chart than the column one would be the line chart. Okay, and then we get a set of lines that go across our chart. Now at the moment, that's trying to chart each actual value. If I go to the axis here and double click, that will bring up the options on the right. I can tell this axis that it is a date axis, and a little lower down here I can change the base from days to months, and you can see then the month values then get mapped in. One thing that needs changing at the same time really is then the labels here. So they don't show dates, they show months. So we come down to number, and then we come down to format the code. And let's take out the DD in the middle and replace that with 3 M's. So that will give me an abbreviated month. and take off that slash. So I get 3 M's, so Jan, Feb, Mar, and 4 Y's give me the full year. I add that code to my chart, and we then see in the axes, quite small because there's still a lot of data, the month and the year, rather than each of the individual days that we've graphed from our data within that month. So it's quite a clever little way of grouping the data together to still give you this pattern of sales over a set of time. That's been a little recap of how to create charts. If you didn't know F11 before, you do now. Certainly one to recall and retain. And then a couple of little problems that can occur when you're creating charts. For example, charting the labels as data, therefore creating some columns for them, and having single large values that you want to exclude from your chart.